Hi, Lawrence LeBrocq, Managing Partner of Garces, Grabler, and LeBrocq. Welcome to Victim to Victory, Triumph Over Tragedy. Today we have the privilege of having with us Ralph Mandarino. He is the owner of Necromantic Brew Co. What is Necromantic Brew Co.?
Well, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Necromantic Brew Co. was founded on the premise that we were trying to have a segment of people who enjoy craft beer that can no longer have craft beer have an opportunity to sit down and enjoy some of the things that the rest of the world can. So if you're celiac or gluten intolerant, we have a product, a gluten-free beer that they're able to drink, enjoy, and basically share an experience that most everybody else has. Because when you're gluten-free generally, you go out to a restaurant, you're going to order shrimp scampi, linguine, white clam sauce, a burger, and it's going to be great. The gluten person or the person that has the gluten intolerance is going to wind up ordering something similar. So it's going to be along the same lines. You'll have a gluten-free bun, it's not going to be as nice, or gluten-free pasta is not going to be as flavorful. The sauce is a little bit, thinner. So we're going to have a meal. We're going to share the experience, but it's not the same experience. Whereas here, you're able to have whatever you want because anything that we personally sell is gluten-free. Let it be the chips, the snacks, the beer. It's all 100% gluten-free. So when the non-celiac or the non-gluten afflicted person comes in, they're ordering the same thing that the gluten person is, and they're sharing the experience, they're sharing the space. And so this way you don't have that little thing ticking in your head as the person that has the gluten problem sometimes has, where it's like, oh man, I'm getting something that's less than.
It's an interesting name. Here I am, a guy with 2 postdoctorate degrees, and I didn't know what the hell it meant. All right, so I had to actually look it up. What does it mean, and why did you name your brew company?
Sure. So just to give you a quick history, so I used to cook gluten-free food at my house, and my friend would come over, we would watch horror movies, we would eat, I would cook, inevitably listen to music. So he said, hey, why don't we try making beer? Because if you're gluten-free food, I can't tell the difference. Maybe we can make beer and it would be something special. I kind of threw cold water on that. My kids were young. I was coaching. I was doing all these different things for them. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the inclination. So inevitably what wound up happening was everybody aged. Kids got older. I had less on my plate. So I said, something, this sounds like a great little hobby. We should brew gluten-free beer. When we started this project at home, I said immediately, listen, I know you might think I'm nuts, but we're going to have a brewery one day, because after doing a light bit of research, nobody does what we do. So especially here in the Northeast, there's one gluten-free brewery in Vermont, one gluten-free brewery in Maine, and we're the only one that's a dedicated gluten-free brewery from New York to Miami. Wow. So in the world, there's about 17, 18 gluten-free breweries. In the state of New York, which is where we're from, you got like 500, 565, something like that. On Long Island alone, you've got 64 breweries, which is where we are. So I wanted to do something that stands out. So when we decided that we were going to do something different, we wanted to lean into that in totality. So not only was it going to be gluten-free beer, but we were going to lean into the horror theme. So we play horror movies. We have horror memorabilia all over the wall. So then we, naturally said, well, what would be a great name for that? So in using the ingredients that we have, so we use all alternative grains, so no wheat, no rye, no barley. We use buckwheat, millet, flaked quinoa, roasted rice, blue organic corn. So once you do a little research there, it turns out those are called ancient grains. And so ancient grains, thinking, how do you bring back ancient things, right? Necromancy comes into play. So you say, oh, well, I don't want to have that. That sounds a little off-putting, but then again, so does necromantic. So we said, Necromantic Brew Co. conjures delicious tasting, naturally gluten-free beer by harnessing the power of the ancient grains.
It's a great name. I'm probably have you explained that probably 100 to 1,000 times in the past, because I'm sure everybody asks you, where'd you come up with that name?
Absolutely.
So it's a great name. It's something you'll remember So it's great for your brand. Now, you were talking about family and coaching, which I can relate to. I spent 15 years coaching football, baseball, and wrestling with my kids, and it's a wonderful experience to spend time with your family. So how do you balance owning a business, a brewery, and family life?
Definitely a challenge, to be certain. Once you step into that entrepreneurial role, everything changes. So, at home, when it's an idea and you're testing it and we're putting together 5-gallon batches of beer, we're doing it in my basement, we're doing it in my sunroom, say, oh, this is, a 3 to 4 hour, almost like a jam session for a band, like we're just watching a couple of movies, we're throwing on a couple of records. We had a vinyl player, upright record player. We had a dirty dollar store shower curtain that we would project the film on. So, we were just having fun, just two best friends hanging out and whatnot. My kids, they would get the better part of me. So in the beginning, I would, Saturday morning, as a coach, stepping on the baseball field, 7 a.m., so I would have double headers for my daughter's 12-year-old softball team. Then I would have to go completely across Long Island. So we'd be in Nassau County for one, Suffolk County for the next, for the 14-year-old girls softball team. And I would finish after that with a double header for the boys' 8-year-old baseball team.
Jeez.
And then, of course, after you play the tournament on Saturday, seeding is on Sunday. And so then you're at the mercy of how well you do to see what you're doing on Sunday. So this would all get done roughly after 7, 8 o'clock on a Saturday because, you're dealing with children.
Right.
Your patience is thin as it is. So you want to come home and kind of decompress. And so this was kind of like the decompression. Once we graduated into now I make 110 gallons, a brew day is anywhere between 8 to 12 hours, and that's if things go exceedingly well. We have a sanitation process that takes 6 to 8 hours, and of course we're open 55 hours during the week. So I had for 2 years worked majority of that shift, so I was working roughly 110 hours a week,
Right.
With no days off, basically. So yeah, strain on the marriage, strain on the relationships, and then you kind of slowly work towards, putting the pieces back into play where, kids don't suffer, wife doesn't suffer, and business kind of tries to flourish. So.
Yeah, it's amazing how once you have your own business, how things change.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And the family life does suffer, but it seems like you've found that balance. Even though you worked hard, you seem to keep the family together. You're still married. Everything's good.
Hey, listen, I'm not going to make some late breaking news here. Everything is great.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So you've done a lot of traveling.
Did a bit of traveling, especially this year. I had a little health situation. I mean, I do have so myself personally, I have celiac symptoms. So I've not been in the greatest health because, again, you're working so hard. I'm eating home less. I have less control about the, safety of the food that I'm eating. So you're kind of, you're at the mercy of where you're ordering from. But the real problem was I had black mold in my basement.
Ooh.
And we were kind of unaware of it. So for the last year, I was very ill. My adrenal gland no longer functions the way that it should, so I'm on enzymes on that. I take more enzymes for, liver and kidneys. You can imagine why. I do, a bit of drinking. It's only for work, I swear. And then, of course, for the adrenal gland, I take some enzymes for that. So that really is where it was tough. So for a year or so, I hadn't been able to do much of anything, honestly. It was just getting up and just trying to truck along and get to work. But this year, I've put an emphasis on trying to grow the business and, do things and meet great people like yourself and come on these types of shows and kind of promote what we're doing more globally, let's say.
And where do you distribute to?
So right now it's self-distribution, and honestly, we hadn't really been doing too much of that. It was mostly out of the tap room located in Farmingdale on Long Island. But one of the local restaurants had really been pushing for it, bar, and so that's a good thing. So I think Monday or Tuesday, being this week, today being Monday, I have to get back to them, and I think we're going to wind up doing something with them where they'll have the beer on tap for the first time. The challenge with the distribution when you're doing kegs is always, I've made my brewing career out of guaranteeing people's health, safety. It's a very important thing for me. And so when you're partnering with a local business, you're basically now entrusting your product, which is, again, in my place, 100% dedicated gluten-free, to a place that now may have cross-contamination. So if a bar says, I want your keg, in theory, that's great. Money comes in, beer goes out. But The reality of the situation is if that line isn't clean, if that, what if you ran Coors Light off that line for 20 years,
Yeah.
10 years? Now, can I guarantee there won't be cross-contamination when one of my customers or somebody that hears about the product says, oh, wow, I'm safe here, drinks it, nobody's going to say, oh, well, obviously it's cross-contamination. No, they're going to say, this brand got me sick.
Right.
And so that's why I've been very, very protective of where it goes and how. So this is a new owner of an establishment, put in all new lines. And so after we do the keg over there, I'm actually going to test it. I have a kit that I can test to see if there's trace amounts of gluten in there. And of course, I'll drink it myself off that line to make sure we don't get sick, because I kind of am very sensitive. So I'll test it beforehand, and then, hey, look, if it's good, it's good. But I do want to make a concerted effort to get the word out there via social media that we've been taking the hit and not doing distribution. I've been swallowing that. We're giving away tens of thousands of dollars in the sense of I'm not able to capitalize on that because I've been so preoccupied with safety. We're at a point now where we could be growing, and I think we should be growing. And that's why now I'll say to people, look, once it leaves my hands, I will test it. We'll have the test strip and documentation saying, look, it's gluten-free now. If anything happens, I don't know what to say. Everyone has to take their own health with their own personal responsibility, but that's kind of a big ask these days.
Right, and I know celiac disease is serious. I have a couple buddies, and they basically put the waitress, if we'll go out to a restaurant, and we'll go on a golf trip or something, they're basically interrogating the waitress. Sometimes they're getting a chef out there to make sure. And, look, you can't blame them. If you're going to be sick, you want to take care of yourself. So that's great. Did you ever think about trying to get a bottle distributor?
Yeah, so I'm working with my person that supplies the grain out in Iowa. Well, that's the other challenge. So there's only two places really in the United States that actually makes the grain. Here in the U.S., you can get a wheat manufacturer, wheat malt or barley malt, almost just about anywhere, and you're paying a lot less. A wheat grain, at least in New York, on a good day, you could pay 98 cents a pound, maybe 128 if things are fluctuating. My grain starts at 2.25.
Oh, geez.
And then depending upon the degree of specialty, because there's different roasts and flavors and everything like that, it could go upwards to $3.20 a pound. So that's a challenge. But point being is, there's one of the suppliers in Iowa has a brew system, which is about 5 times bigger than what I have. And we're kind of discussing, negotiating if I can put a canning machine in his place and then kind of contract him to do it out of his place. So this way I don't have to ship the grain because it's a considerable cost. You're shipping it from Iowa. It's roughly $1,000 every time. And then, on top of the costs. So if I have a canning machine, we can almost have a strategic partnership where he'll allow me to use his brew system at no cost, but I'll allow him to use the canning machine at no cost. And of course, he'll pay for his own cans, I'll pay for the ingredients, and then one hand washes the other.
Sure.
So we're in negotiations with that, so that would be great if it worked out.
Well, good luck with that. And about the black mold, hopefully you got a very good lawyer to handle that in New York, so to take care of that, because that's horrible.
Yeah, it was rough.
Talk to me about fear is fuel.
Certainly. So, one thing that I've noticed, being a fan of the horror genre and things of that nature, a lot of times in life, things are scary, some more than others. But you know what? I found that true success is really in the shadows. It's in the places where you really don't want to go. If we consistently live in comfort, that kind of fuels just, I don't want to say blasé, but we're all just very kind of like floating around. This is good. I don't want to, upset the apple cart. But anybody that's truly successful kind of went through these places that were scary, things that they were maybe afraid to do, either phobia or just, I don't know if this is going to work, so I'm not going to do it kind of thing. Right. And I know for certain that there's never a right time for anything. Everyone tries to prepare their best for, when the time is right, I'll strike. And in theory, that's great. But the world doesn't wait for us, unfortunately. So I know it can be pretty scary to put yourself out there and to do things. But I find that when I do things of that nature, things that make me inherently uncomfortable, the payoff is actually quite substantial.
Was there ever a time that fear almost stopped you from pursuing this?
Oh, yeah. So when we got started, because I have infinite wisdom in my, my business chops, we signed our lease March 20th, 2020. So for those that are not in the
yeah.
Northeast, you know, New York closed March 23rd, 2020. So in a different lifetime, I was a semi-professional poker player. And so I looked at this thing and I said to myself, well, you know, in the history of the world, economies have never shut down completely. So I said, I'll take a shot. I feel like this is going to be the move, you know? And the irony, of course, is that the landlord at the time, he definitely smelt something because we were in negotiations for about a month. And I had a very good real estate attorney. It's so funny. I say we have demands. We had demands. I wanted a hot water heater. You know what I mean? We didn't have hot water. I wanted a bathroom. You know, we had one bathroom, but because we were going to have let's say 60, 70 people in there, you have to have two bathrooms.
Sure.
So I was like, you know, give me a bathroom and give me a hot water heater. No, you know, that was the holding point. So on that Friday, that's what wound up happening. My attorney calls me up and says, great news, you're getting everything that you want. I said, oh, okay. How fast can you come and sign? I was like, well, I don't know. How fast can I drive to the bank and get the checks?
Right.
So he said, can you get here by 4 o'clock? Sure thing, 4 o'clock on that day. Signed everything. Saturday, we wind up going to meet the real estate agent. She gives me the keys in the most funny capacity you could. Because, again, it was the very beginnings of COVID. Nobody really knew anything.
Sure.
So we're outside meeting, you know, no masks or anything yet. And she's sitting there, you know, outside like this with the keys. And then I come close, and she drops it.
Oh.
I got to pick it up off the floor, you know. I said, okay, if that's how we're going to, you know, play it. But so that was the Saturday. And then sure enough, Sunday, Monday, that was it. We didn't even pop champagne, didn't celebrate, nothing. And then we were done is the point. So we had all expenses outgoing. And I'm sure you're aware, but I was young at the time. I think I was 36. I didn't know much about it. But it is more expensive to insure an empty building than it is a building full of drunks. So I was paying $16,000 annually for insurance during COVID's closure. And mind you, I didn't open until October 28th, 2022.
Ooh.
And so once we opened, my insurance went down to $6,000 annually.
Jeez. So now you're talking about 2 years.
Yep. 2 years. And then the challenge really was everything in between. So, and this is where the fear comes in. So firstly, local municipalities were unable to meet, so therefore we were unable to get the zoning changed. So we were a retail store initially. That was what it was zoned for. And I needed public assembly. And so, well, these villages aren't meeting, so what are you supposed to do? So from March until, thankfully, I mean, I don't even want to sound resentful, but they got it going in November, December. Yeah. So when they got it going via Zoom, November, December, we got on the docket for December. And thankfully it was, you know, they did their best, I will say that, always. My village, Incorporated Village of Farmingdale, broke their back to make sure whatever we needed, whenever we needed it, we were on their minds. We didn't fall to the back of the line, you know, because they knew what we were up against financially.
Sure.
And so that I will never complain about. So they did the best they could. So, but now, like I said, time is ticking. So let's go fast forward April now. So now you're in April 2021, and I'm just able to get a contractor in for nothing more than a quote. So we get the guy in for the quote in April, and then we wind up pulling the trigger, I don't know, after Easter, you know, right first week in May. And you know how contractors are. So 6 to 8 weeks. Everything is 6 to 8 weeks. And 6 to 8 months is where we're at. So now I'm up his ass all the time. Where are you? You're not showing up, because guess what happens during that time? The city opened up. And when the city opened up, my shitty little $75,000 job no longer meant anything. Right. See, at first it was, oh, this is all we have. $1 million jobs, $2 million jobs in the city. Who cares about me? So all the workers are getting pulled to do different work. Another delay. So now you're in 2022. And the way that the licensure works in New York, which I will be critical of because it's backwards, you have to have a lease in hand. You have to have a finished product, not your product, but the actual lay of the land. So everything's got to be constructually finished. All the furniture has to be, and it's got to be a finished, ready to open place. And then they'll go through you and say, oh, yes, we approve you or not approve you. So if New York, for whatever benevolent reason, decides that they're not going to issue you your license, then now you're on the hook for your lease because the landlord's not going to care. It's not their problem. Right. So that was something that you had to sweat, and that was anxiety, was the point. The more anxiety's coming in. So I know I've got this insurance anxiety. I've got the anxiety of not knowing if they're going to approve my license, the anxiety of when are we going to open, and then we find out, oh, well, you also have the fire marshal that has to get in there. You say, oh, my God. So that's another thing that you have angst about. And they weren't too thrilled about it either because in 2020 there was an election. And in our county, there was a lot of turnover. The guy that I was dealing with prior to retired. So nobody knew who I was.
Sure.
So now it was like starting from scratch with a whole new group of people. And then because of the elections, new laws were passed. And they tried to hold me accountable for things that just came through the pipe. But I'm like, I should be grandfathered in because I've been dealing with this guy since we moved in almost.
Sure.
I actually had the architect draw plans specifically for what the marshal was saying because I'm like, why fight City Hall? I just want this thing to go smooth. So then they decided to delay us another 7 months.
Oh, jeez.
And so with everything else, it was just, I honestly didn't believe we were going to get open at one point. I said, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you want to put a price tag on it. The actual price was supposed to be $375,000 all in for a small business to open this brewery. That's everything. $675 by the time we were done.
675 plus you lost 2 years of income.
Right.
That's an incredible deficit.
Right.
And you overcame that.
Well, but that's
You must have been a hell of a poker player then. You must have had a lot of money stashed around to survive that long.
Well, no, honestly, and the best part is, for me, it was a passion project because of what it was, but the nicest part about it is my father, he kind of made his way through life in the latter years with investing. So he was a stock market guy, glued to CNBC and all that stuff. So when he recognizes a good investment, he's all in on that. So that was kind of the nicest part about it because we don't always see eye to eye and stuff like that. I mean, father and son,
sure.
It's just the way it goes. But his belief in me and putting his money where his mouth is, I was almost drawing off of my inheritance at that point because now he's retired, he's 85. But, even then he was, 79, yeah. So, you say, here's something, I have an idea, and then to say, even at $325,000, that's sure. a big chunk of money. And you say, oh, well, here, and what it's like asking your dad to buy you a car or a new toy. It's like, no, this is big dollars.
Yep.
And he saw the value in it. I mean, it took a little bit, of course, but as it should have, nobody's just going to say, here's a check. Mm-hmm. So I would make the beer. We would bring it to other breweries, other bars, family functions. And I think once he saw, my cousins who were all way older, 25 years junior to anybody next in line in the cousins. And so they would just say, wow, this is delicious. What is this? I said, oh, I just made it in the back, They said, oh, this is something. You thinking about selling something like this? And he's sitting there. He's not participating, but he's listening. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to do what it takes. I said, I don't care if I got to, mortgage the house or whatever it is. I'm going to go for this. I'm going to give it a shot. And I think at that point when he was like, so you're serious? And I was like, oh, I'm serious. And he was like, we can try and find investors. I said, yeah. He goes, well, put your stuff together, but, you come to me first. I said, oh, okay. And then, we had the discussion, and he's like, I want you to do your best budgeting and things like that. We'll try and do what we can to knock down some of the numbers, which, of course, now is like futile.
Right.
But, he believed in me, which was nice.
Which I'm very interested in. How many batches did it take to make a beer that tasted good, where your buddies are saying, oh, this is really good? There had to be a number of batches where this isn't so good.
No, I got to be honest. This is the best part when someone asks me that question, because this is the only time you'll hear me with an ego is that, no, right out the bat, it was great. Wow. And again, it's because I like to cook. And so I know what flavor profiles go well. I know what I like. And generally, not always, but my flavor palette profile is generic, so people kind of like that. So long and the short of it is we bought a kit at home, and the kit was, had instructions and everything else. And so it was kind of like a dummy guide to it. And we just needed to learn what's the procedure, what's the process, because those are things, ChatGPT didn't exist then.
You're right.
And gluten-free beer, I mean, if you Googled at that time, I haven't done it recently, but at that time, if you Googled, how to make gluten-free beer, all you would get was gluten-free beer and then how to make beer. So you would million videos, YouTube, stuff like that, how to make beer. But the gluten-free aspect of it was just lost on people because, again, at that time, there wasn't many either. There was about 12 or 13 in the world, and 2 are in New Zealand and Australia, and 4 are in Canada. So really, there wasn't all that much to begin with. So luckily, we did more research because the kit was just what they call, it was a liquid extract. So you're using honeys and sorghum and syrup, which were all liquids. So the process was condensed and shorter. And so that's why we were able to do it in such a smaller amount of time. These days, we kind of upgraded everything, and you have, what you call an all grain system. So that's why we're using the grains, and you need to convert starches into sugars. Of course, that was lost on us because most alcoholic manufacturers use wheat, rye, and barley not just for the flavoring, but for the cost efficiency. So wheat, rye, and barley has an enzyme called glucoamylase, and that's built in. So you don't need to add anything else. We need an enzyme to add, in addition to, because none of our grains have that built in. But so anyways, there was a website that sells these grains, and they put us in touch with the actual manufacturer of the grains, and they were great about it. They were like, oh, you want to use these grains? We'll teach you. Here's what you need to know. Because for them, it's another customer.
Sure.
And look what we were buying 16 pounds worth. Now I buy thousands of pounds worth. So it was worth showing me what to do.
That's incredible. So how much do you distribute now or produce on a
basically,
monthly?
So basically, as far as how much we do, I have what they call a 3.5 barrel system, which is incredibly small. So you would almost classify it, if you're familiar with the term microbreweries. Sure. I'm actually considered a nano brewery, so even smaller than that. 3.5 barrels nets me, on a good day, 110 gallons, which is basically 6.5 half kegs. So it's not a lot of product. But having said that, due to who we are, what we do, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, most of my customers are horror fans. Not so much on the gluten-free side. So when we decked out the place more horror theme, horror-centric, those are the people that really are my day-to-day customers. And people who like craft beer as well. But the gluten-free people, they're not what we had thought initially, like that would be the driving revenue force. So, I mean, honestly, dollars and cents, when we first opened, we were making anywhere $26,000, $36,000 a month. And the most expensive item was a $9 beer. Keep that in mind also, because again, no food. So now things have slowed down, economies change and stuff like that. So we're not nearly hitting those numbers anymore. But then again, neither are my neighbors, which are restaurants.
Sure.
Everyone locally is down, 40 to 60% in revenue annually. So we're just, we're doing what everybody else is doing.
So in comparison to other gluten-free beers, where would you put yourself? What type of beer are you making? Because there's so many different types, pale ale to stout, Pilsner. Where are you at in the food chain?
So basically, I wanted to do something in the sense of thought process. Gluten-free people don't have options. We don't. When you go to the place, to a restaurant to order food, you have one or two things. Maybe they have a gluten-free pasta. You don't even get to choose what kind of pasta. Sauces are not all gluten-free. It's limiting. So I said, you know what? And I was never the big craft beer guy, but I want to give everybody options. So I think that is the crowning achievement for me, because I've been celiac as long as craft beer's boom has really been. So I'm 13 years in just about. And having said that, a lot of these styles didn't really exist. There certainly were no, IPAs and things of that nature, 13 years ago. And if they were, it wasn't mainstream. So I actually have to literally figure out what the beer is on paper, because I can't drink it. I don't have a comparison.
Sure.
And then come up with something. So I'm very proud of that fact that, as you say, what do? I run the gamut. Anything that I can make, I do make. I make a sour beer. I make a stout. I make many stouts. I make pale ales. I make blonde ales. I mean, right now, we're almost in October, September being, really fallish. So this time of year, pumpkin beer. I have 6 different pumpkin recipes that we do.
Really?
I do an apple pie blonde, which is just everybody's favorite beer. We do a triple berry blonde, which is blackberry, blueberry, raspberry. I have lagers. I have pilsners. The stouts, sometimes I make them nice and smoky. I have an Oktoberfest, which is nice and roasty. You know, anything I can put together, any type of recipe I can think of, or if there is, you know, a major manufacturer that has something that everybody wants, I try to make a gluten-free version of that, just so people can try it. So in our short little time that we've been open, so we say almost 3 years, October 28th will be 3 years, I have over 64 specific recipes that we've done.
That's a lot.
It is tremendous.
That's a lot of different types of beers in that short span. Wow. So what kept you going? You know, you're 2 years in. Why didn't you just say, oh, the hell with this? This isn't going to work out. It's not in the cards. COVID hit. We've got turnover in the government. I can't get the approvals I need. Why didn't you just say, all right, the hell with this?
Well, there definitely was the old carrot on the stick. So, you know, you would talk to somebody who you thought was kind of in command or in control or a decision maker within that process, and they dangle the carrot. And so there were times where I had heard, oh, you know, your approvals are coming next week. So then I was like, oh, great. You know, next week I could, you know, we come this long, you know, I can come another week. All right. So you get to that week, and then you make the phone call, and you would talk to the same people.
Right.
And then they gaslight you like you're a jackass, and they say, what are you talking about? There was no approval. We didn't even, it's never even been discussed yet. And I was like, what? I literally spoke to you last week. Well, I don't know who you spoke to. You, I spoke to you. No, I don't recall that conversation. And if I did, I certainly didn't make any guarantees. I would never say anything like that. And I say, oh, my misunderstanding then. Thank you very much. And then you move on. But you hang up the phone, and I'm like raging. Sure. Because I'm sitting here and I'm like, as you say, is this ever even going to happen? You know, and at what point do you pull that plug? At what point do you say, forget it? Mm-hmm. And so maybe it was me being stubborn because I really detest failure, you know, and I always said growing up, if I only had things in my control, you know, then I know that I can control it. But in the scenario of this, there were finite things that were in my control, but I can't control who shows up to work and who doesn't show up to work. Right. I can control the contractor I hire, but then again, is that going to mean anything? Because, so this one didn't work out. You mean to tell me the other one would? I don't know that, but you could make your own assumptions there. You know, same thing with certain things. You have no choice with who you're dealing with and how. So at some points, I was having tremendous anxiety. I never had anxiety. I didn't even know what anxiety was. Increase in heart rate, difficulty breathing, can't concentrate. All these things are today's Ralph. You know, if you went back 6 years ago, I never had these problems. Right. So my body wasn't digesting it well, obviously, and it was the unknown. So I personally am afraid of the unknown. That is a big fear of mine. Again, the unknown, which is not in my control. But I will face that, and I will live in that gray area because I feel like, again, that's where the sauce is made. Like, that's the good part. The unknown is, instead of fearing that, you embrace that. And look at where I'm sitting right now in Point Pleasant with you, having a great conversation. Right. I came in a day early. I was on the beach yesterday.
Nice.
Couldn't do that if I wanted to, if you went 2.5, 3 years back.
Yep.
So that's why I say face it.
Well, that's some great advice for people. So what would you tell somebody who wants to start their own business? What advice would you give them? Now, you and I have been through this, right? And it's freaking hard.
It's a battle. And it's a daily battle.
It's not easy. So we know how difficult it is. What would you tell a person that wants to start their own business? What do you do to overcome the fear, the anxiety, and all the hurdles that you have to overcome?
The hardest thing that you have to do is wake up every day to the criticisms of everybody else. And I mean everybody else. When you're talking about family members that say, hey, listen, you gave it a good shot. You had a great idea. Maybe you should pack it in and cut your losses. Or maybe it's yourself after listening to all these outside influences talking at you, or you see somebody that's in your industry that's, wrapping it up, calling it a career because they say, well, I've had enough, circumstances have changed, things are different, I'm retiring, whatever, what have you. Or maybe it's a partner that you thought you were going to get into business with, and then all of a sudden they pull out for whatever the reason, and now you're all alone. You need to keep one thing straight and in your head, and that's the belief in yourself, because that's what got you here to begin with. The whole thought of starting your own business is, I have something that I think will make a difference, make a change, make an impact, something that will make money. What changes? If you haven't been able to get into it yet, if you haven't been able to kick it off and get started, what actually has changed? Nothing. But it's everything around you. It's the voices and the noises, the static's getting louder. And you have to be able to block that out. And that, to me, is the most difficult thing to do, because when you're getting it on one thing or two things, yeah, sure, Teflon comes in, comes off, no problem. But if you're getting it from everywhere, from your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your in-laws, your wife, your kids, people in business. I remember one time I was in a local Blimpie shop, and I would go there all the time, and I loved the guy. And I told him, I got this great idea. I'm going to be moving into town and everything else. And, I was all hyped up. And he goes, you want to open your own business? I said, yeah. He goes, why? Why? It's miserable. Don't do it. Make your product and sell it somewhere else. Don't have a tap room. Don't do these things. It's going to be miserable. So then you get the people that, the other end of it is you get jealous people. So the advice is not genuine. They present it as genuine, like they're looking out for you, like a shoulder, put their hand on you and say, oh, listen, I understand your strife. Please, maybe you should reconsider. But it's not your benefit. That's their benefit. So not everybody's on your side is my point. So if you have a belief in yourself, follow through.
I agree. My mom once said to me, she goes, son, how do you just keep going? And I looked at her, I said, Mom, I've been knocked down so many times. I don't know if I'm up, down. I just keep punching and going forward.
Yeah.
I just keep doing. And that's some great advice for people, because you are going to have so many detractors and so many naysayers saying, you can't do it. Why are you doing this? And you get in your own head and say, why the hell am I doing this? What is, and then you internalize it and you figure out, because this is what I want to do.
Exactly.
All right, and this is who I am. So if somebody wants to have a great beer, not just a gluten-free beer, but a great beer, how do they find you?
So we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we have events all the time, so we're always promoting the events. So you'll see, all the customers are there. Our social media, we kind of promote the people, not so much the product. So it's kind of cool to see all the things that we have going on. But those are the mainstay places. We're working on a website, haven't really gotten to it. It hadn't been a real focus of mine for a while. Plus, it's kind of an expensive endeavor. But we'll get a website up shortly. But right now, Facebook, Instagram, Necromantic Brew Co. You can Google it, see what we're up to. Google reviews are great, Yelp, stuff like that. Everybody, has a good time when they're in there.
So if somebody really wants to have a beer, I know where you are, they know how to find you, but where are you physically located?
So we're at 253 Main Street, Farmingdale, New York. That's 11735. So we're right on Long Island, right in the middle of the island.
That's awesome. Well, if you ever want to have a great beer, go see Ralph, Necromantic Brew Co. Thank you.
Thank you.